Hey guys, thanks for joining me, and if you like what you see, please subscribe. Hello friends, welcome to Sharp Ends. It's been a minute since I posted anything, and that's because I've had COVID. I'm kind of on the outside of that right now, but I might still cough while I make this, and I thought that I would go ahead and fix up a couple of things that were broken or that needed some touch up with my knives. So the first thing I want to do is I've had a couple of knives recently that got caught on some things, and the clip bent open. So this is a Lynch Clip that's on my Spyderco Shaman, which is an awesome knife, and has this compression lock made easy CME on it, which I really like. The green doesn't quite match the green of the scales, but I really like the way that it feels. And I really like the ergonomics of this knife. This is just a great knife. Anyway, so I bent this clip, and now I'm going to bend it back into shape. Yeah, so it's been interesting having COVID finally. I have not gotten it. The rest of my family has gotten it several times, and I haven't, and somehow I thought I wasn't ever going to get it, but it finally bit me. And so I've been at home recovering from that. And yeah, that's not a fun experience. I'm sure most of you guys have already had it. Anyway, so I'm taking the Torx heads, taking these, the Torx bits, or sorry, the Torx is out of here. The hardest part for me is probably going to be getting this clip back on, because this sometimes it's hard to get it in here, but I'll show you some tricks about how to get these screws, these Torx screws, back aligned in here. First off, when you have a clip that's bent, you can see where the bend actually happened, and the bend actually happened right in here, close to where this circle is, and that makes sense where it would bend. That's the thinnest part of the metal is actually right here. So in order to get it back, I want to bend this part right here back. This might take me a couple of different tries, but this is DLC coated, so I don't want to scratch it. So I'm going to try to put the force, it looks like I'm going to try to put the force of this right here and here to squeeze it back down and hopefully bend that back. And I guess first off, I'm just going to try doing it with my fingers and seeing if I can get it good. And that helped a little bit, but I'm going to need a little bit more force. So what I'm going to do then is, and that helped a little bit, is I'm going to put this cloth on either side of it, and then I'm going to use a pair of adjustable grippers here. I'm missing my terminology. And I'm not going to use needle nose pliers, because needle nose pliers, if I were to use that, the angle of it is wrong. It's not coming down, it's kind of coming from the side. The force would be kind of coming down from the side of it, and I want to apply pressure straight down. So that's why I'm going to use this. Let's see now. And I'm going to hold it for a second and then release slowly and see. So that started to bend it back right. And again, I'm using the cloth so I don't scratch the DLC coating on this. And now I'm going to adjust back a little bit more, back towards the spoonbill part of the clip. And I will say that, you know, maybe that is one of the bad parts about having this spoonbill Lynch clip, is that the spoonbill part, the spoonbill part is what caught on the edge of a chair, actually, and I kind of was turning, and this part is caught a little lip of an edge. So I'm looking here, and I can see that this flat part right here should be about where that is, and it's still not quite right. Also, it looks a little, I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on one side of this rather than the other, because it looks like it also got a little twisted. It didn't, the pressure of it wasn't straight on here. So I'm going to kind of do that in the hopes that I kind of bend it, twist it back into shape. And I think I have now. I still see a little bit too much of a bend right here. So again, I'm going to try one more time to bend it right at that one specific spot. And I think that what really needs to happen now is that's good, and I think that the angle is pretty good, but I think that's pretty good. Let me see if I put this now on here, and all right, so you can see that there's still a little bit of a gap. There's still a little bit of a gap between the clip and the scale, and I want the clip to be right on the scale, otherwise it's not going to be tight enough on my pocket. So I'm going to try again. And this time I'm going to come farther back. Toward the, all right, that is looking better. Let's see how it looks now. Okay, it's closer, but no cigar. So I'm going to go a little bit more. And with these clips, like, you want to be careful when you're bending them back into shape that you don't overdo it the first time. So going incrementally step by step is also very important. All right. So let's try again. How close are we? Let's see. Again, still that same amount. All right, so I'm going to try again. This time I'm going to come a little bit closer to the back, to the big bend in it. And, you know, that's one of the things about having a clip that is bent rather than milled, is that it will tend to bend. Something that's milled in general isn't probably going to have, I mean, it will bend when it's milled, but not as much as it would if it was milled. So a bent clip can unbend, right? Ooh, now we're really close. I don't know if you can see that, but we're a millimeter off right now. So I think it just takes a little bit more. I really like these clips. These Lynch clips are great. And I'm going to try doing it from the other side now a little bit too, so that even though the force is coming straight down, it's, let's see now. I think that this is going to be good. Yeah, so I think you could fit half a piece of paper between the little gap that's between the spoonbill part and the scale, but I think that I'm going to call that good. I'm going to put this back on. Like I've said in past videos, I prefer to take my Loctite, and instead of putting the Loctite on the threads of the screw, I like to take my Loctite and I like to put it inside the threads themselves of the insert. This scales are pretty deep, so the actual part that needs the Loctite is pretty far down inside. So I'm using a tool here I got in my watch repair kit that is very small to put the Loctite in there. I'm using medium Loctite for this, and I'm making sure it gets down into the threads. And once I put this on, I'm going to let the Loctite cure for a good long time, 8 hours before I actually start using it, to let the Loctite dry fully before I put dynamic pressure on it. So this is the part that's hard, is getting the center screw in that hole. So I've kind of, what I like to do is use some needle nose pliers. Oh, I'm not even going to need needle nose this time. All right, so I was able to get that in. What I like to do is put all of my screws in the clip first, and then I put each screw in one at a time, tighten up just a little bit. So now they're in, and I'm going to line this up. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing this the correct way. So I want this tip up, right hand carry, so like that. All right, so here we go. This is the side that I want it on. Oh, and so I think I just put Loctite. Yeah, I just put Loctite in the wrong holes because I am silly. So now I'm going to put Loctite in the right holes because I wasn't paying attention last time. Of course, Spyderco is really good about giving you lots of different options how you want to carry this. Left hand, tip up or tip down. Right hand, tip up or tip down. But I got confused and just went with whatever side that I saw it on, which isn't the best thing in the world. But a little bit of extra Loctite in the holes that I'm not using isn't going to be the end of the world. All right, there we go. And then I'm going to get these guys lightly in there. I'm not going to put too much pressure on them. And then I'm just going to make sure that the screws go in their holes first. And then I'm going to start tightening down each one of these screws just a little bit so that the threads catch, but I'm not tightening down all the way yet. All right, and yeah, the clip is much better now. And now I'm going to do a final tightening on these screws. It did, bending this and then rebending it back did make it so that it's not completely lined up the way it was when it was new. However, it's substantially better than it was. And no one's really going to notice, unless they're an expert, that it's not quite square anymore. There we go. All right, so there's one. The next thing I need to fix is actually my Skaha. I've been carrying this a lot because I'm about to do a review of it. In fact, I'll probably record the review right after I'm done with this. So the Skaha is a great knife. It's made from North Arms, and it's got one of the most satisfying sounds a flipper can make. Do you hear that? Oh, just so satisfying. Lockup is great. So nice. One thing about the Skaha, it came to me not very sharp, and I was a little disappointed by that. Took my KME, and I was able to put a very nice edge on it. This is Magna Cut, by the way. Oof, that is so nice. I really like this knife a lot, I gotta tell you. I think that this is gonna be a keeper. I'm never gonna sell this. I am actually been thinking about moving a bunch of my things lately, selling a bunch of my knives. The reason for that is that I don't want to have my knife deployed while I take off the clip. And you can see again, this got caught. I think it was the exact same chair that it got caught on. And this is a wire clip, so actually a little bit more robust, I would say, than the Lynch clip as far as being able to come back from a bend. But that happened. I actually haven't taken the Skaha apart yet. I try not to take my knives. I used to take my knives apart as soon as I got them. Like, I'd get them in the mail and I'd take them apart immediately. Now I like to wear them in a good bit before I take them apart and oil them and everything. You know, I don't know why that is. Well, I guess the reason why I do that is because I want to see how it comes from the factory for a while first before I start messing with its detent, its potential detent and the lining and all that stuff. So I think with the wire clip now, instead of trying to bend both at the same time, I'm going to bend one and then the other and try to match it. So I'm going to do a little bit of a bend here. And so this is going to be a problem with the wire clips, is that I apply too much pressure, and that's going to be way too much of a bend. I don't need to worry about snail trails on this so much because it's not DEC coated. So I'm actually going to take my little needle nose pliers and I'm going to bend it back up just a little bit. That's good. And then now I'm going to try to mimic the same bend on the one side with the other. That's one of those things. I don't know if you guys have ever bent a clip by accident, but you got to take them off and fix it. Otherwise, it's just going to fall out of your pocket. And that can be bad for a number of reasons. If it's in your pocket, it could open accidentally. All right, so that looks like it's really good now. It could open accidentally and then cut yourself. I have done that. I've reached into my pocket before and my knife has been open and I've accidentally cut myself going in. All right, and again, I'm going to apply this to the inside of the threads rather than on the threads of the screw. It's interesting, The Skaha has, this is, I guess it has, does it have 3 different torques? No, it has 2. Okay, so, it's a rather large Torx head. The T10 for the pivot and for the clip, but the back spacers are T8. I like that they're larger than a lot of companies usually do. I like that because the more surface area you have, the less likely you are to strip the head. All right, so I have done that, and now I'm tightening this back up. And that's good. And now you can see the clip is nice and tight against the side of the scale. The centering on this is perfect. However, when I was testing the Torx bit on the screw, I noticed it's super loose. It is pretty loose. So you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take this screw out all the way on the pivot, and I'm going to add a little Loctite. I wonder if this has any Loctite on it. No. All right, so there's no Loctite at all on this Torx bit, so on the pivot, which could be annoying because without the Loctite and you use it a lot, it could eventually just come loose on you, and that would be bad because you could lose that screw if it comes out all the way if you don't notice it in time. Also, it'll change the detent and centering on your knife if your pivot screw is coming loose and changing how tight it is all the time. All right, so I put a little bit of Loctite in there. And now with this bolt out, you can see it's just slightly favoring the show scale side. And now I'm going to tighten this back up. And it does feel like this is a locking insert here. Despite the fact that this has a Torx head here, I think that this must be milled to be locking. And now I am going to tighten it. And so when you're putting the pivot bolt back in on something, what you want to do is you want to tighten it all the way and then loosen it just a little bit till the detent is correct. And it is, I would say, almost perfectly centered. I'm going to tighten it up just a fraction more. That feels really good. All right, so that is now good and fixed, and I'm going to let it be now and let the Loctite dry on both the clip screw and the pivot screw, and then I'll come back to it in about 8 hours and it'll be okay. Next, what I want to do is look at this TRM Neutron. This has amplify scales, the Koi amplify scales. I really like how this looks. I'm actually thinking of selling this one because I hardly ever carry it, even though I really like the way it looks. This knife has always been off-center to the show side. So what I'm going to do this time is try to center it and then put it back together. There's a couple of different ways we can do this. The way that TRM suggests doing it is loosening it up and then actually twisting it into shape and then tightening it back down. Cool thing about Three Rivers Manufacturing knives and the Neutron and basically their whole line except for the shadow is that you can remove the scales but keep without taking the pivot off, which is cool, especially for a situation like this where I don't want to tear the whole knife apart in order to be able to fix the centering on it. So I'm going to take off the scales, and you'll see that you have full liners on this. This is really cool feature of TRM, of course, because you can just change the scales anytime that you want and not have to tear the whole knife apart and take the pivot out. So you have lots of options, and so the theory is you can get lots of different options for your scales, and then you can make your knife look different. whenever you want, which is cool, especially if you're someone who doesn't necessarily want to have a full knife collection, but you do want to be able to dress up your knives a little bit differently. So you can have one knife, but you can make it look like 3 different knives. I don't think I really need to remove the clip side scales for this, but I'm going to anyway. Just to see inside here. All right, so here we are, and you can see that it's favoring a little bit of the show side. And so what I want to do is force it over just a little bit to get it more centered. It's not rubbing against the side, so this is really an aesthetic thing rather than an absolutely need to thing. And it looks like this is T10 on the pivot. So I'm going to loosen up the pivot, and I'm going to loosen up the back spacers a little bit. And we should see that the alignment becomes even worse while I'm doing this. All right, so I think I am going to need, I'm missing one of my Weehaw bits that I want to use for this, so I'm going to find one of my other types of drivers here. What is going on? Is it this guy? It's like a T7. And I'm having trouble finding my T7. Well, this T6 right here is going to work. All right, maybe it was a T6. All right. So I'm going to loosen these up just on this one side. And then I want to force this over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of paper, fold it up, and I'm going to put it inside here, forcing the knife over to the other side where I way over to the lock side. And then, so this is one method of doing it. Three Rivers kind of says that you should actually physically twist your knife like this to get it, but it's very hard to tighten it back down. And I've done it that way as well. And it does kind of work. But I'm going to try this first. I'm going to take this and jam my knife all the way over there. And you see with the paper right now, it's way over here, pushing against that. And now I'm going to tighten down the back spacers on this side. I'm not going to worry about putting new Loctite in this. For now. And then I'm going to tighten the pivot down all the way. All right, so now it's all the way locked and it's over there. So the theory is now I'll be able to pull this paper out and it'll stay over toward the lock side, and then I'll be able to loosen the pivot so that it's just center and stop, and hopefully the detent will be correct for that. So now I'm going to pull this paper out. And it's actually almost perfectly centered now, which isn't great news because I believe that it needs to be just a little bit looser to get the detent correct. And like I said, this knife has always been a little bit persnickety, and that it's always favored the show side a little bit on the blade. But okay, I just loosened it a little bit. I think that that's going to be good. Okay, so the centering, see if we can see it. The centering now is pretty much perfect. And let's see how it feels once I add the scales back on. Yeah, so I've had a couple of different things now building up where I'm like, all right, I need to fix all this. And so I thought I would make a video, say hi to you guys. I know it's been a minute. My content has gone way down as far as producing it because I've been working on several shows lately, and then I got COVID right at the end. I've got a long 4-day weekend, and of course, that's when you get sick, right when you have some time off. It's like, why can't you get sick when you actually have work to get done? But, you know, that's what happens. Your body gives its all while it's working on a big project, and then right when you start to feel relaxed and you're coming down, and that's when your immune system is ready to get kicked in the balls. All right, so I again put some Loctite down on the threads, and I actually think that you know, that trick of instead of putting it on the screw, putting it on the inserts is actually something I also learned from TRM's FAQ or maintenance, knife maintenance tab on their website. If you haven't checked out TRM's website, you should do so. I know a lot of their knives are still hard to get, but they've made their drops almost weekly at this point. I think that we can safely say that their drops are now weekly. So they're producing knives. You just have to stay with it for a week or 2 or 3, even a month before you actually get the model that you want. But it's gotten to the point now where instead of being something where you have to sit down and really pay attention to their website for 6 months before you get what you want, it's become more of a sit down and wait for, you know, 3 or 4 weeks before you actually get what you want. Some people are luckier than others, of course. All right, so the detent is good. Lockup is great. The centering, now that I've got the scales on it, it seems like it's just still slightly towards the show side. So I think that's just, you know, that's just the way that this knife is. It could also be the scales themselves. Maybe the thickness of the scales aren't quite symmetrical, and so it seems like it's that way, but it's not rubbing on the side, so I don't mind it being slight. But again, when I say slightly towards the show side, I mean, let's see if I can get a good view of this. I mean, just ever so slightly, and I can't really tell if I'm showing this or not well enough for you to see that, but all right, cool. The last thing I wanted to do was to tear this apart and put it back together again. This is the Nymble from what is the EDC, Everyman's Carry, anyway, the name is going to appear right here on screen right now, but this is the Nymble. I can't remember the name of the company. But a really cool knife because you can open it multiple different ways. And the reason why I wanted to tear it down is because I noticed that the pivot screw was coming loose and I felt like it needs some more Loctite. Also, I've never taken this knife apart, and it's currently heavily favoring the show side, and I think that's because it was starting to get loose. And oddly enough, usually, maybe I'm incorrect, but I feel like most of the time a knife has the screw head part. Well, I don't know. All right, so see how okay, so this is, so here's the knife, okay? And you see how it's favoring the show side, and now I'm starting to tighten up the pivot bolt, and the knife is coming back towards center. So I noticed that this wasn't, that this was way over on the show side, and I touched the pivot, and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is coming off, and I tightened it by hand. And now I just corrected it a little bit. The detent is tighter, which is great. Maybe this doesn't, oh, maybe it does have full liners. Yeah, this does have full liners. Whereas, you know, you saw that this has basically full liners. The Skaha does, or the, does not have full liners. It only has a liner on the side with a lock, and otherwise it has a very small liner on the other side, and the majority of the rigidness of this is the thickness of the scales and the material it's made out of, which is fine. It's just different. Anyway, but this does have full liners. But do I want to take this apart? Or do I just want to use Loctite? I think I'm going to go ahead and take this apart because I've never taken it apart before. And I think it might be fun. Let's see what's inside this Nymble. All right, so when taking apart a knife for the first time, I like to take the pivot out first and try to get the blade out first before I start playing with the handle. So this comes out really loosely, and it looks like there's a bolt with a collar. Yeah, is this a collar? Yeah, there's a collar here. And now we can see the back side of the pivot. And I'm going to, and it doesn't look like it has Loctite in there, maybe just not enough, I'm not sure. And now I'm going to try to punch the pivot out. And I'm going to be careful of this guy because it has this really nice symbol here, this atomic symbol. All right. All right, there we go. I was able to get that out and get the collar out. Great. And so I'm going to line everything up on the side. Over here. And then this should come out. And this is running on bearings. Interesting. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and, because it has bearings, they're in a track, I want to be careful that I don't hurt the bearings. And that the bearings stay in there. All right, I don't want to force anything here. And this is the first time I'm taking this apart, and it's catching on something. And I'm not going to force it because I don't want to break anything. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the back spacers. And once I do that, I think the front end will expand a little bit, and then I will be able to see what's going on. And take the blade out. So I'm just going to loosen these guys up a little bit. I assume that the clip actually isn't acting as a back spacer, but maybe it is. I'm going to take the clip all the way off. All right, so there's the clip. I'm going to put it over there. This bolt, it was acting as a back spacer actually. That back clip is acting as, I'm going to take this off, put it over here. Oh, I see. So what was catching on it is that there is a, what am I going to call that? This lock bar, or this bar here that goes through the blade, is inside of a track. And so when I was trying to pull it out, that's what was going against it. It is dirty inside of here, so it's probably a good thing that I'm taking this apart. You see here that it actually has a screw here for the detent ball, and that, I guess, is so that you can replace this if you need to, which is a cool little feature because that can wear down to the point where you're not going to use it. This back spacer has D-shaped indents. So you have screws in here that go from both sides of the scale. However, in the screws themselves are D-shaped, so it goes in there and you don't have to worry about getting a screw on either side of a screwdriver on either side to loosen it, because it's free spinning. It's not free spinning, so that's pretty cool. I'm going to take some alcohol now and I'm just going to clean everything up, oil it, and put it back together. The other thing that I want to do to this Nymble is that I've been using it for a while now and it is not very sharp. So I'm going to spend some quality time with my KME system. Oh, that's interesting. So not only is it, look at that. So not only is it bearings, but it's got like a bushing, like a flat washer bushing in here too. So that's interesting. I'm going to try to keep all of that lined up so that the one side goes back together now that I've used it a lot. I'm going to make sure that I put it back together in the same way. I'm not going to accidentally flip this washer over to the other side. Now that the racing and the track has been running on the same side and with the same stuff, I'm just going to keep it the same. So this part is clean. And so while I'm going through here, I'm going to go ahead and use light KME oil. I'm going to put some here and put that down and put a little bit on this side. And then I'm going to start cleaning. I guess the next part I will do is I'll clean the other lining. There's no right or wrong way necessarily to do this, just as long as you keep track of all the parts and how everything goes back together again. Some people are really anal about keeping track of all their screws and stuff, and I am, but I'm not so, but it depends on the knife, and it depends on the situation when you're putting something back together. There's lots of crud in there. Look at all that crud in here. So I'm glad I took it apart. It's been sitting in my pocket, and I've been using it a lot here and there. It's a fun little fidget toy. And then I'm going to take out this, I'm going to try to take out this, there we go. And I'm going to clean underneath the racetrack. I'm going to clean this bushing a little bit, keeping track of which side goes where. And then I'm going to take this towel here and just make sure that the alcohol's all out of there. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of oil there. Put the bearing, the washer, whatever we're going to call it. It's not a washer. Oh, well, it is a washer. The washer or the bushing or whatever we want to call it back inside there. You'll notice how the bearings are two-sided. They've got a side that's indented, and then you've got a side that's more flat. And so you want to make sure that you keep that the same. Basically, the flat side always goes against the blade itself, and the side that's a little bit more indented with the balls being more sticking out more need to be toward the scale side. I'm going to get another Q-tip and some more oil here, and now I'm going to clean this up, this blade up. You can see that it's definitely doesn't have any more oil in there. There's some gunk. The gunk has basically mixed with the oil and gone out of there. That being said, this is so nicely done with the bearings and with the bushings that I'm going to make sure that I know that that is the washer that goes over here. So I'm going to clean this side and then put it back in with a little grease, a little oil. I'm going to make sure that I clean the inside of the pivot as well. I'm going to flip it over and go ahead and do the other side. If I were to push on this track bar, I'm not sure exactly what the official name for it is. I could probably get it to pop out of this knife. It's not part of the blade. I'm not going to do that, however, because sometimes it's really hard to get back in. All right, so that's nice and clean. And then I'm going to make sure that the lockup side over here where the lock goes is all nice and clean as well. All right, so this guy goes over here, and I'm going to go ahead and put some oil here first. Now this detent track, where the ball goes into this little, you can see that where it has worn a little track and it goes in there. That was dirty. I'm not going to use the light stuff on that. Instead, I'm going to use the heavier stuff. When you have constant contact point between two sides, like the bearing and the side of the knife, I use the light stuff. But when you have a track situation, I use the heavy stuff. And I'm going to put a little bit of the heavy stuff in the recess right there. That is not going to run away. It's not going to go away when there's not contact-to-contact surface, whereas if I use the light stuff, it would just drain out of there. The heavy stuff will stick there for a while. And I'm going to put a little bit on the ball itself, just a touch of the heavy stuff on the ball itself. And that will kind of spread out on the track it's made, and then it'll keep it nice and lubed the whole time. And now that I've got the bearing in here, I'm going to put a little bit more of the light stuff on the bearings themselves. I'm not trying to get every single surface coated right now. I'm just putting a couple of drops here and there, because once it starts going in the racetrack, it'll spread itself out nicely. Now I have that in there. I'm able to flip it over because I'm hoping that the washer won't drop out, because the viscosity of the oil is going to keep it lined up and in there. And now I'm going to add a little bit of oil on this side, and I'm going to add this in here. And again, the flat part of the bearing goes against the blade. There we go. And now I've got some on that side. I've got that all oiled up. This is all pretty much ready to go back together. So next, what I want to do is I want to clean the pivot with a little bit of oil. Get another Q-tip. I'm going to clean out this pivot. It looks pretty clean, honestly, but you can see some wear marks from where the blade has been going around it. That's fine. And then I'm going to stick this back up through here. So this is D-shaped, and there's a little bit of, the liner is also shaped to receive that D shape so that you don't have so that it's not free spinning when you tighten it all back up together. And I'm going to put the blade back in here. And this is currently on the show side. There we go. And now I'm going to go ahead, and while this is together like this, I'm going to go ahead and now put in a little bit of Loctite inside the threads of the pivot and the back spacers, which back spacers also double as where the clip gets attached to. This is right hand tip up only carry. And because of the very nature of how it's constructed, that's the only way that you can do it, because the clip itself is part of the backspacer arrangement. I don't know if they make left-hand versions of this. Sometimes I also add in the racetrack itself some oil, but because this runs so smoothly on tracks and everything, this part right here doesn't need a little bit of oil. It's not inside of a metal track, and it's just the carbon fiber that it's running against, so I'm not going to put oil in there. And then I'm going to flip this over and put this on here. And that went together surprisingly well, I think. So I don't think that that's supposed to be so proud. I'm going to take this apart again because I don't like how the pivot, this bushing, I believe that this is supposed to not be so proud, this pivot part. I have to go back and look at my video, but I believe that this pivot is this pivot really like that? I guess it is that proud, huh? Okay. So I had to come in here, and I realized that I put it together wrong the last time, and I think I know what the problem is. This pivot bolt is sticking way proud up here, and I don't think it's as deep. It was working fine, but I realized that I think what I did is I put the bushing on, the pivot fell out, and then I put the bushing on backwards. So I'm going to take this out and see if I'm correct. Yeah, I can already tell I'm correct. So what was happening is this pivot part was sticking up really proud like that, and I was like, I don't remember it being that way. And then I went and I looked at the video, and I was like, yeah, it wasn't that way. And then I realized, oh, it fell off, and I think that it needs to go the other way. And when it does that, now it's sitting flush, and now it's going to go together correctly. So, you know, working on knives is almost as much of an art as it is a science. So, you know, it's good to have a picture showing you what you did beforehand and then going back and checking it. That seems like a really basic, stupid problem to, you know, I knew that something was wrong when I did it, and I couldn't figure it out. And then when I went back and looked at the picture, I was like, oh yeah, that's what happened. I'm going to put just a little bit more heavy oil here in the ball recess here, the detent recess. And now I'm going to put it back together. So now it should all be good. And then I'm going to make sure that the D gets correct. And now the bolt itself is a little bit more proud for receiving this screw, which is good. And now I'm going to tighten everything back up. So, yeah. So sometimes you make mistakes. I'm glad I caught it, and I'm glad that I recorded it so that I could show you guys how I made a mistake. That happens sometimes. Now, the Loctite was never let to dry. I literally just made the video and then looked at the picture and then came back and looked at it again and realized. So now we've got, this is nice and flush. This show scale, which is, or this show bolt here, pivot bolt is flush with the side, and that's great. And I'm going to look at the centering. The centering now is perfect. detent feels good. Cool thing about the Nymble is that you can open it up 6 different ways, or tons of different ways, right? I'm not much of a front flipper guy, but it has that option. Good. Yeah, that's nice and tight. And now I'm going to let the Loctite dry, and this will be good to go. All right, thanks for watching Sharp Ends. Really appreciate your time with me today. I know this is a freaking long video. It's like 46 minutes long or something like that. So if you made it all the way to the end, why don't you like and subscribe? I'd really appreciate it. And if you didn't make it all the way to the end, then you missed me asking you to like and subscribe. But I hope you did anyway. Have a good one. See you next time on Sharp Ends.